You're listening to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem, your bi-weekly dose of true crime history in a small rural community of Wisconsin.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
And Gavin, I have an important announcement before we get started
this
episode.
I had some announcements as well. What do you have?
Well, the main announcement that I would like to make is that a listener informed us that everybody should listen to a podcast that features the guy that created Beavis and Butthead named Mike Judge.
Yep.
Because he has a strikingly similar tone of voice to Gavin. Almost to the point where if you weren't paying close enough attention, you might get him confused.
Yeah, I didn't listen to it, but I was told that it was a similar voice, and I believe the word was cadence, a similar cadence as
yes,
well.
Yes. It's got the very deep voice, as well as, just the
yeah.
In fact, when you do that, it might even sound a little bit more like him. All right. So that was my announcement. What do you got?
So, two things, two very quick random things. One, just throwing it out there. If anybody wants to be a sponsor of this podcast, I will gladly accept. If you want to give me like a free meal or a free beverage at your establishment, I'll shout you out every time. I'll gladly do that.
Yes, me and Gavin are now taking free dinners.
Yeah.
And then for the rest of it, we'll just mention you on the podcast for the rest of the history of the podcast.
Yeah, because we don't really make much money off of this. So, if someone wants to throw me $5-10, I'll say good things about you. Two, so this isn't really anything, but yesterday I had one of our listeners approach me. One of our listeners who works for the local police department.
Ooh.
So I'm not going to say his name. He knows who he is. Shout out to him. But it was funny. He asked when we were going to do an episode on a very notorious murder that happened about maybe 3-4 years ago. And I was like, that is never going to happen. It was never.
Well, I would have looked at him and said, in approximately 53 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or 47 years, I guess.
I won't do it. I live in this community. I mean, the facts are the facts. Like, we're not going to say anything that isn't on the record, but it's still pretty emotionally raw for people. Yes. I don't think we're going to talk about that anytime soon.
Right. And even if you're not trying to be insensitive about something like that, it's very hard when you're not one of the, a family member of the victims to know what will set off the victim's
That's a fair
feeling.
point.
You could say the most defenseless thing to you that seems to you that could just really trip somebody that's close to that situation off the wrong way.
Yeah. So yeah. It'd be an amazingly great story, but it probably will never happen because I try to avoid any situation where parent, brother, sister, child, whatever, is still around and doesn't really want to be reminded of that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, today we're going to talk about William Wolfe. This was a presentation I gave a week ago. By the time people hear this, it'll have been a month ago, but as we record this, it was a week ago. And he is the guy who ran the Grignon Mansion in Kaukauna. So this, you might say, well, what does that have to do with Fox City's Murder and Mayhem? I feel this one it'll count.
If you missed the last episode, I'll give the little bit that Gavin gave up on this episode, that whatever this guy was up to is creepily similar to grave robbing.
Yes.
Was what I remember.
That is correct. I don't know that anybody used that term in his own time, but there's not a big difference between what he was doing and that. Yeah. So the Wolfe family, Germany, came to Wisconsin, settled. William Wolfe grew up in Black Creek. He had really no formal education. He went to grade school, but he grew up on a farm, so he left early to work on the farm. But he was apparently popular. He was involved in a lot of local politics. He was treasurer of Black Creek for quite a while. He was chairman of Black Creek for 6 years, which also put him on the building committee at Outagamie County, which means he was on the building committee for the asylum for a callback there. Mm-hmm. He was school clerk for 15 years. He was assessor for 2 years. He was county clerk from 1910 to 1918. As part of being county clerk, he also served on the county's draft board during World War I. So this guy is no slouch. Like, anything that went through Outagamie County in 1900 to 1915, 1920, he probably had some part of it. Mm-hmm. So definitely a very notable guy in his day. 1935, he was put on the head of the committee to restore the Grignon Mansion in Kaukauna. Super quickly here, the Grignon Mansion was built in 1837. 100 years later, it had not been properly maintained. The family still lived there in the 1930s, but it had not been properly maintained. And when the final member of the family left and sold it off to become a museum, it needed a lot of work.
So it went from the Grignon family directly to the city of Kaukauna?
Not the city of Kaukauna originally. Originally, it was owned by the county.
Okay.
But yes. So, at the time it turned into a museum, the final member of the family was still living at the St. Paul nursing home. So it wasn't something that was decided years after the fact. It went from being a house to a museum, like, immediately. Mm-hmm. As head of that committee, he was able to raise money from the county, from city, from various other people. He was able to get things restored. He got the local youth groups to help out. Now, ironically, it's the Great Depression, so this is not the time you're asking for money, but it actually worked in his favor because there were federal programs where men who were out of work could get sponsored and paid by the federal government to go back to work. So men who knew how to, frame a house would come in and they'd make sure the sides are all up to code. Well, I don't know what code was in the third, but they came in and made sure everything was standing, and the house basically by the time they ended that looks like how it looks today, which is fantastic. It's a really great house. So
most of this renovation got paid for by the federal government. Like, they didn't really even have to raise money to do it. Or I guess the labor, right?
The labor was paid by the federal government, yes.
Yeah, okay. But they still had to buy all the materials and stuff like that.
They still had to pay some. I would say they paid relatively little. The total amount that the county and the city paid amounted to $8,000, which, granted, that's 1930s money, so it's still a significant amount of money.
Yep.
But it's not like millions of dollars or anything. I don't know if he already had this reputation, but as soon as he's kind of overseeing the mansion, he gets this reputation of sort of being like the go-to history guy in the area. In 1938, while he's still working on reconstructing the house, he claims that he finds the first Methodist church that was west of Lake Michigan. So of anywhere in the U.S., the first Methodist church that was built, which would have been built in September 1832. He finds it in Kimberly. He's celebrated for this. They have a big announcement. The press comes out. They put a marker up. There's some suspicions about this because there was a woman who was working on a history of the Methodist Church in Wisconsin, and she's like, I've been working on this for 10 years. I had no idea where it was. Wolf comes in, looks at some papers, and is like, I know where it was. So there's some suspicions. He also, when they do the announcement and he explains what happened at that church, there's things that he says that are just not possibly accurate.
Okay.
He's got some names and dates a little mixed up. So not a trained historian archaeologist. So he says things that are a little goofy sometimes. Inside the mansion, he has 2,500 books that were owned by the family and 1,000 old letters, which he wanted to put on display as soon as display cases came in. I don't know how many of them ever were. Some of the books are still there. None of the letters are still in the house.
Okay.
The Post-Crescent comes out to interview him. He says that he's found structures on the property that date back to 1760. This is just not true.
Okay.
There's buildings on the property that could possibly be dated to the 1780s, but not the 1760s. And you might say, well, that's not a big difference. And it's really not. But it seems like he pulled the 1760 date out just to purposely put it pre-Revolutionary War.
Okay.
That seems to be where he got that number from. So 1760, 1780, yeah, not really a big difference in years, but it's a big difference in trying to make the claim that there was a settlement pre-Revolutionary War. So that seems to be where he got that number from. During the excavation of getting the house back into shape, he would also misidentify artifacts. He would say that he found china. It was pottery. It wasn't china. He'd say things that the dates were really kind of off. One he put at 1790. It was more 1813, which again, not a huge difference, but it's enough where like it's really not clear where he's getting these dates from.
I mean, it sounds like he's just basically pulling them out of a hat because he doesn't know how to gauge how old this stuff is.
Yeah, he is not in any way trained as an archaeologist. So how he's attempting to date things just by pulling them out of the ground and looking at them, I have no idea. October 1939, the Oshkosh Public Museum announces that they found the burial location for Augustin Grignon and his family. So for context for people, Charles Grignon is the owner of the Grignon Mansion. Augustin Grignon is his father, who did previously live on the property, but moved away to Butte-des-Morts in Winnebago County to start a hotel.
Okay.
Oshkosh Public Museum found Augustin's grave along with his wife's grave, and it would turn out that there were other graves there as well, but they found along the way.
And were these on the property, or are they just...
These were on the property. The property at this point had gone through a few hands, but they had a general idea where they were because they knew it was going to be on property previously owned by Augustin. But now it seemed kind of urgent to identify where they would have been because the current owner purchased the farmland and wanted to turn it into what he called summer homes. This would be along Lake Butte-des-Morts, so people with like cottages and stuff.
Okay, so we got them a little mixed up there. I meant like this was on the Grignon Mansion property, but it's not.
This is not on the Grignon Mansion property.
This is on his...
This is on the Butte-des-Morts property.
Gotcha.
Yep. So... They find this. They find that Augustin Grignon and his wife and a couple others that they find are buried there. Even though there's no markers or no gravestones, they can identify the bodies pretty easily because once they find them, they're all in coffins. The coffins are marked, so they know who's who. And the Oshkosh Museum decides that what would be best is, since they can't really do anything about keeping them there, they should move them to Holy Cross in Kaukauna and put them in a mausoleum. The reason being that the Holy Cross Cemetery in Kaukauna is on land donated by the Grignon family. So It seems appropriate to kind of bring them back to a Catholic church, because they were Catholic, on land that they donated. Solid reasoning.
Yep.
William Wolfe, again, not a professional, not supposed to really be involved in this process, wants to be involved in this process.
Okay.
So he and two teenage boys, and I don't know who they are. If they're ever identified, I've never seen it. Him and two teenage boys go out to Butamore in the middle of the night.
And they steal the bodies.
And they steal the bodies, and they load them into the truck, and they drive them back to Kaukauna. Now, that's already not great. But there was no mausoleum built yet. So there's nowhere for the bodies to go.
Okay.
He talks to George Greenwood, who ran the local funeral home, and George Greenwood takes them in. So at least he got that figured out.
Did George Greenwood know that they were stolen bodies at this point?
I don't know what he knew at that moment. I'm sure at some point he was made aware of it. But here's the thing. So they were going to put them in a mausoleum. They never succeeded in raising money for the mausoleum.
Okay.
And they sat in the Greenwood Funeral Home from 1941 until 1961.
Shut up!
So for 20 years, they were in the Greenwood Funeral Home, which also doubled as the Greenwood House. The funeral home was a little separate room off of the house. So an entire generation of the family grew up with the Greenhouse in their house, basically.
This is wild.
Yeah.
Why did they... I mean, did the Greenwood person just put them down there and forget they were there?
Oh, no, they knew. They knew. But then eventually in 1961, I don't know why they finally figured out that this mausoleum was never going to happen, but they did get buried in Holy Cross. Somewhere between 1941 and 1961, and I suspect this had something to do with the way that they were transported. They no longer knew which remains were which. So they don't have individual graves in Holy Cross. There's one marker that lists the people in that burial plot.
Wow.
So there's like 6 people who are all kind of together in Holy Cross. Not very well done. All right. So yeah, he continues to kind of dig around the property in Kaukauna. There is an area in the back of the house that he called the Old French Village that did have a few residences, like a trading post. None of these buildings were standing, but you could kind of tell where they were because like the stone foundation was still there. And he would excavate them. The archaeologists who have gone back since are very... They're kind of nice about how they describe, like they don't like what he did. One of them, so Peter Peregrine was an archaeologist at Lawrence, and he's kind of the guy who'd been doing work for the last 10, 15 years. He said, for example, Wolf's enthusiasm exceeded his abilities. He took few notes during his excavations, and he did not record the context of the material he excavated. There's another quote by Richard Boyd, Dick Boyd, who says, all these early excavations on the Grignon properties were not conducted following any recognized archaeological techniques, nor supervised by any qualified anthropologist or archaeologist. Unrestrained diggings by well-meaning amateurs, as well as looting by reckless vandals, were commonplace nationwide. However, he's like, both of them are like, they're trying, they don't like what he did, but they're trying to be nice about it. They're like, nothing you did was correct, but, I guess that's kind of how people did things. Starting in 1943, he's in correspondence with the State Historical Society about having the papers in the house turned over. Those would be like all the letters and whatever other documents are in there. As soon as the state hears this, they're excited, they want it. Then Wolf gets kind of reluctant, and he's like, well, I kind of like having it. So the State Historical Society receives things a little bit at a time between 1943 and 1959, and it's pretty clear that not everything made it to them originally, because when Wolf dies later on, his daughter then donates his papers to the state, and his papers contain a number of family papers as well. So up until the time of his death, he was still holding on to a lot of it. And there was never an inventory done until the state received it. So we have no idea
how much just got lost.
How much just got lost. If you loaned it out to people, never got it back. No idea. Late 1943, an old burial ground was found by the superintendent of streets in Kaukauna. It was found because apparently when cemeteries get really old, the ground starts sort of sinking in the spots because like the coffins will collapse. He finds this. He notifies Wolf because Wolf is the guy in town. You tell when you find old stuff. Wolf goes, checks it out, and he believes it to be a Catholic cemetery built by Father Sam Mazzucchelli in 1831. We do still tend to think this is correct. So to Wolf's credit, we think this is probably right. It's also very remarkable because in 1831, this would be a very early cemetery in the state of Wisconsin. 25 graves were found. Wolf said that the graves would be marked with crosses in the spring, but in the time being, he decided to open up 2 of the graves and see what was inside. In one of them, he finds a child, and in another one, he finds a husband and a wife who were buried together.
This guy's slightly morbid, maybe? I mean,
yeah.
Who has the feeling of, ooh, let's go open up the graves in the graveyard we just discovered?
Yeah. A couple years later, Dick Boyd comes along. Dick Boyd is now today a retired archaeologist. But at this time, he was a 10-year-old boy.
Okay.
And Dick Boyd was playing next door in the quarry. There's a large quarry next to the mansion in Kaukauna. He was playing in the quarry, which really probably a kid shouldn't do, but he's doing it. And he's looking for fossils. Apparently this is a kid who really likes old stuff. So perfect kid to bump into William Wolf.
And to become an archaeologist, too.
So Wolf's like, hey, I see you hanging around the property. Do you want to be my assistant? And Boyd's like, yeah. So from like age 10 to 14, Boyd is always helping out Wolf, digging up old properties, giving tours, and he's written up in like the local newspapers. He's written in a statewide magazine. Like people love that there's this little kid who's like the guy. But shortly after Dick Boyd comes on, Wolf's like, I have something I want to show you. And Boyd's like, okay. So they go back to the cemetery, the 1831 cemetery, and he's like, let's open a few more graves and see what's in here. They find another child, and then they find a man in a blue and red uniform, which Wolf has described as a British uniform. I have no idea. I've never seen what it looks like. The graves have never been opened since. Mm-hmm. But it's certainly possible. Like, that's not a huge stretch because people who lived in the area in the 1820s, 1830s would probably have had British uniforms. So that's not really a stretch.
Okay.
So if there's a guy buried in there in his full British military uniform, I'd believe that. That's reasonable. But yeah, he already knows there's a cemetery here. He's alerted the authorities that there's a cemetery here, so it becomes like a protected site, so they don't develop on it. But he feels that he's got to come back and show the kid. He's like, let's just crack another one open.
Good learning experience.
Yeah. Very strange. He continues to find other remains in the area. In 1950, Wolf finds 12 Menominee individuals on the property. They stay in the house from 1950 to 1953. There was a room in the house where he would do like, I don't know what he would do, but he would examine these things in the house. Then in 1953, after having them 3 years, he donated them to the Neville Museum in Green Bay. In 1951, he'd find other human remains, which eventually got turned over to the Outagamie County Historical Society. In addition to the human remains, he found 2,880 objects, which in archaeological terms are called funerary objects, or things that come out of graves.
Okay.
He found silver jewelry, crosses, Spanish coins, beads, brass bells, brass tinklers, gun parts, iron axes. He found all kinds of cool stuff in there. He found one man who had been buried in his canoe.
I mean, I would think that was the thing they did back then, though, right? You know?
Yeah. That's cool. The burials were estimated to be from between 1773 and 1809. I'm not sure exactly who came up with those dates, but those are reasonable dates, I think. What kind of bothers me about this, I want to let people know, I don't think any of this is okay. Just to be upfront, I don't think any of this is okay. But I do feel there's something slightly worse about it being not that old. If you find native mounds, you should never dig them up. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not okay. But I'd feel like it's slightly less bad if they were 1,000 years old and you were doing it because you wanted to learn something about the history of the culture or something like that. Like, I could see some legitimate educational reasons to see what's in there and then maybe put it back afterwards. I see that. These are things that, at the time he's doing this, are like, at most, 150 years old. Mm-hmm. Which means these aren't some completely anonymous people. Like, they don't know who they are. But they're people who, like, would have been known to, like, the grandparents of the people who still live in the area. Yeah. And that, it makes it extra disturbing to me. Because, like, even though we don't know what their names are, these are people who interacted with our grandparents.
Yes.
These aren't some ancient people that have no connection to the area whatsoever.
You know that somebody out there in town, if they knew who you were playing with, I guess would be the way I would describe it, would be very, very upset about it.
Yeah, I think so. The area across the canal, which was called either the Grignon Flats or the Kaukauna Flats, had a lot of mounds. It had a lot of mounds. Even before Wolf's time, we know that at least 30 mounds were destroyed. So he was not alone in this. There's a number of articles of like local community groups wanting to preserve the mounds and discouraging looting and things like that. So even though, yes, it's common that people would come and loot these, it's not like it was universal. There were plenty of people out there who recognized this was probably not okay to do. Mm-hmm. In 1951, something happened that almost makes Wolf look okay by comparison.
Okay.
On the area called the Flats, there is today, and there was then, I'm never really sure what the actual title of it is, but like the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
The place where all the sewerage goes.
Okay.
And in 1951, they were doing a massive expansion of the sewerage plant. They got approved. They came in with the bulldozers. And according to a newspaper article, while they were going through and bulldozing, 100 bodies came up out of the ground.
Okay.
Wolf and Boyd ran over while they were doing this, and they grabbed as much of this as they could. And that stuff, this is 1951, that stuff stayed in the house for decades. just everything they pulled out, including skulls and things like that.
Did they have them on display?
They had them on display.
Wow.
They had them in glass cases on display. But now, I don't know this. I was just told this last week. But apparently the stuff that the bulldozers bulldozed, they then used as fill. Because they were flattening the land to build the place. But then they took what they all did and they used it as fill.
Okay.
Back in those days, the 1950s, Kaukauna, Appleton, a lot of the surrounding areas had a lot of ravines. So as part of developing a subdivision, you would have to flatten out the land by filling in the ravines.
Okay.
So I'm told that this was used as fill for the ravines. And I wish I remember. Somebody told me what neighborhood it was. I don't remember. That's bad on me. I should have made a note.
Probably better for people not to know that, because we don't need people going and starting digging holes trying to find.
Right. But it was mentioned, and then the discussion was, well, does that mean there's random body parts underneath an entire neighborhood? And there could be. There could be, because they weren't sorting this out. They were bulldozing it and then dumping it in the ravine.
Wow.
So yeah, so that makes that extra fun. By 1954, all digging ceases. Wolf would stay on until 1961, but in 1954, all digging had ceased. He had been under increasing pressure from the county. He worked for the county. The counties who paid him, and he was under increasing pressure from them to stop. He had been... at that point, it had been 10 years where they had asked him to stop, and he kept doing it. But finally, they apparently convinced him to stop doing it. So he didn't do that. He died in Appleton in February 1967. He had a lot of connections, as I say, both politically and to other groups in the area, like the Eagles, the Moose, the Elks, all those great organizations. His daughter Annabelle donated his personal effects to Wisconsin Historical Society. So in addition to the Grignon papers, there's also now Wolf papers, some of which includes Grignon papers. But there's other things that are like, he had attempted to write a book, he never did, but the manuscript is in the file.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of photographs that he took that are in the file, including photos of like 10-year-old Dick Boyd holding the bones that he's pulling out. I mean, none of this stuff is a secret. If you look in Wolf's own papers, like, he's pretty proud of a lot of it. So
during this whole time that he's doing this, I mean, what is first of all, do you run into anything where the county's like questioning having this guy in charge of this stuff? Like, was this guy more or less looked at as a joke because he clearly doesn't know what he's doing? He's way over his head.
So, great question. I'm not sure. He seems to be very highly respected by both the county and the local residents. Now, there is some clear friction between him and the guys in Oshkosh and Green Bay. So the Oshkosh Public Museum and the Neville Public Museum, they both had professional archaeologists on staff. They had guys who had been trained, knew the proper procedures of how to catalog everything and make sure it's all done correctly. And they did not like the way he did things. They were always polite about it, at least publicly, but they didn't really care for it. But there was, as far as I can tell, there was really no corresponding professional in Outagamie County.
Mm-hmm.
So he just kind of was the guy. And everybody looked at him. Like, when they found something historic, they'd be like, oh, call Billy. Billy will come and look at it. And he was extremely intelligent. I mean, not well educated formally, but he was extremely intelligent. Like, he'd spent a lot of his time researching this stuff. So he really was a guy who knew a lot of things about the stuff that was found. But yeah, his handling of it is is not great. And now, ever since him, there's been archaeologists who come through from Lawrence University. A team from UW Oshkosh just came through earlier this year. And it's kind of unfortunate because they can't do as much with the stuff he has, because the way they date things is like figuring out what layer of the dirt it's in and things like that. And he made no effort to do any of that. He'd just have boxes and say, I pulled this box out of this site. It tells you nothing about where in the site it was, how deep it was, anything. So all the methods of dating are useless. So,
but on the same token, if he's not around, none of that stuff exists anyways, really. Probably
correct.
Because he was the one pulling it out. And, going back to the story of the wastewater treatment plant, in many ways, you think about it, like, it sounds terrible that they catch wind that they're digging up all these dead bodies and they run over there and swipe as much of it as they can.
Right.
But on the flip side, they don't do that. What happens?
Right.
They just put that under somebody's neighborhood in Kaukauna to fill in a hole.
Right. So, yes. No, you're exactly right. And so this, as I said, this was part of a talk I gave last week. Again, for listeners longer ago, but for us last week. And when I have to do these presentations, I have to declare the topics I'm going to do anywhere from like 3 to 6 months in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had picked this as a topic, I had picked it under the point of view that William Wolfe, Billy Wolfe, everybody called him Billy, was not a great guy, was doing some really terrible things. And I still feel that way, but in the course of putting it together, from me having to pick a topic to actually going and researching and writing it, I did become more sympathetic. And for those reasons, like you say, like what he was doing was not right, but obviously if they're okay with the bulldozer coming in and just wiping the whole thing out, him salvaging it doesn't sound so bad by comparison.
Right, exactly.
And also, the area that he called the Old French Village, which I don't know how to explain it over audio, so I'm not going to explain it over audio other than to say it's in the back of the property. What he did was not technically correct, but it turns out that it's really good that he did it, because the nearby quarry property continued to expand. And one of the buildings he excavated is completely gone now, and another one is partially gone now. So if an archaeologist wanted to come in now and do it correctly, they couldn't. Like, one of the buildings is entirely gone.
And it's gone because the quarry just took it out?
Because the quarry just keeps getting bigger.
Okay.
At this point, the quarry's probably not going to get any bigger because there's the fence line and they like are right up to the fence. But yeah, so like, did he do it correctly? No. But if he hadn't done it and written down things at all, even if he was doing it incorrectly, nobody would have ever known that building was there, because it would have been gone by the time anybody got to it.
I'm going to flip this and give it a whole different perspective, and you tell me if you think I got it wrong.
Okay.
This could very well be blamed on the county because they put somebody in a position that probably shouldn't have been in that position.
Sure.
And William Wolfe?
Yeah.
He did the best he could in that position.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think that's wrong.
I think he probably went a little further over the top. Like, he probably should have been the guy that should have realized he wasn't qualified to be doing this stuff. And so when somebody reached out with something, he's like, let me get a hold of the archeologist at the Neville Museum or something, bring him out with me so that we know we're doing this right.
Right. I think that's kind of the dividing line is that whether he was the right person to appoint for the job or not, I don't know. He was a member of what was then called the Pioneer Society, which is today the Outagamie County Historical Society. I mean, he was already deeply involved in a lot of local history research, so he was very knowledgeable. He was a good person to have on board. He was very passionate about it, which is an important part of the job. You know, somebody who really went out of their way to try to promote the importance of it, sometimes to a fault. That's a major problem that I have with old-time local. Today's local historians, much better. Local historians 100 years ago made a lot of claims that are very exaggerated. Mm-hmm. And I don't always love that, because then they'd say things, they'd get in the paper, and then later sources would quote them, and like, it's not true, because they would inflate certain things. But that was kind of the job at the time, was, you know, come see this house. It's one of the most important houses in the entire state. Like, that's his job. So I don't know if he was the wrong guy, but I'd absolutely agree. When it came to doing the excavations, he, if not the county, he should have known, like, he knew the guys in Oshkosh and Green Bay. He knew there were guys who did this for a living. Mm-hmm. He could have called them in.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And that seems to be where the big problem is. And part of that is him. He should have acknowledged that he wasn't qualified to do this. But then part of that is, too, that the county should have been like, hey, you know, yeah, we put you in this position, but, you know, there are times where you're not qualified to deal with the stuff we're going to throw at you, and you need to bring in somebody that is qualified to do it.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So, I mean, the moral of this story to me is that this guy's not a monster, but it just kind of shows you the kind of stuff that, I mean, he was doing what he thought was the right thing to do, but when you look at it, what is it? What are we, like 50, 100 years later?
Yeah, 50, 75, yeah.
Yeah, and when you look at it and you're like, okay, yeah, well, he didn't quite do it the way we probably
and that's the thing. That's exactly it. Yeah, when I'm looking at it, at first I was extremely very critical, and then I'm like, well, this is the taking the bodies in the middle of the night from Butamore to Kaukauna. That one's hard to justify. But a lot of this is like, he really wasn't that far outside of what other people were doing. He wasn't doing it right, but he also wasn't so far out of what was going. One more thing I'll just throw out there. You can find old articles from the 30s, 40s, 50s of like Boy Scout troops going and like sifting through mounds. Like, they'll do that as part of their Boy Scout camping weekend, is they'll find a mound and they'll, you know, they won't tear the whole thing up, but they'll kind of dig in it with like their hands and see if anything comes out. And it would be written up in the paper, and they'd be like, wow, look at what this 10-year-old boy found in this mound. How cool is that?
No, that is terrible.
It is terrible, but that was considered normal at the time.
Yeah. Which is just, wow.
Like, that's where all the arrowheads come from, you know? Like, I don't know if kids today see a lot of arrowheads, but even when we were kids, like, you could go to a lot of places and they'd have big displays of arrowheads.
Yeah.
Most of those came out of mounds.
Wow. That is... Oh, man. All right. Well, you know, this wraps up. Not a lot of chaos, not a lot of mayhem, but there's a lot.
It's not murder or mayhem, technically speaking, but I think that it's a wild story that people don't really know. The 1831 cemetery with the British uniform, that is to me a fascination. That's something I want to know more about. And we may never know more. I know exactly where it is, but we may never know more about it because it's just kind of a little fenced off area. It's not marked in any way. So it may just sit there, and we'll never know.
But at least he kind of preserved it so that it could still just sit there, right?
He kind of he kind of preserved it, but he wasn't really good at letting people know it was there. The state knew. But it wasn't well known locally that it was there. So in 1999, I think, somewhere thereabouts, they went in, they put it in a cell phone tower. And while they were running the trench to attach the cable to the cell phone tower, they did pull up another grave because the cell phone company had no idea they were building next to a graveyard.
Wow. That is scary.
So it's not, like I said, nobody in town knows it's there. There's maybe 10 of us in the whole city that know it's there.
But it's marked off so that you can't easily access it, at least.
Now it's got a fence.
Okay.
So you couldn't get into it unless you really wanted to.
Good. All right. Well, another interesting Kakana character that we never get sick of hearing about these people, man. They continue to amaze.
It's a very Kakana heavy podcast, but I don't apologize for that.
And you shouldn't. So with that, if you don't got anything else with this one, we'll wrap this up and we will be back in 2 weeks with another interesting story. Do we know what the next one will be, Gavin? Or are we...
Well, so it's a 50-50. Now, you've been talking to another person to have as a guest. Depending on how that times out, that could be next. But if not, next time we are going to go to the little tiny town of Dale in Outagamie County.
Okay, yes. And this was one, I believe Gavin was really struggling with the writing of this one. A
little bit.
A lot of information there.
It's a lot of information about Dale. There's not a lot of information about the event that this was a listener submitted one. It was not a lot of information about the event in question. So it's, even though it is a chaotic event that resulted in death, it's going to be one of our more historic episodes because I'm going to put it in a larger context. Cool.
And I'll just give everybody, I don't know if we actually talked about, but the episode that I am working on, sort of, I mean, I'm not, I would say that we're all working on it, but...
I would say you're working on it more than me because you read a book about it.
But we are going to go up to and visit Ishpeming, Michigan, which is way out of our range, but it happens to be, I call it Eric's second home. Because I like the town so much, and there was a terrible, terrible mine disaster that happened there many, many years ago. I can't even remember the year it happened. I don't know if you remember it off the top of your head.
I want to say 1920s, but I honestly don't remember either.
Yeah, but 51 people were killed in it. So Gavin found an author that had just recently, this year, right, released a book about this incident. Yeah. So we're going to see if we can have her on for a podcast about the story.
Yeah, she seems open to it, so I think it's more about the timing than anything.
Yeah, she wanted us to get through the book before we actually set anything up. So now that we're through the book, we'll work on that. But that should be coming soon, and I'm pretty excited about it. So
good.
Can I tell you another useless piece of information that I learned from this book? It's completely not related to anything.
You want to tell the listeners about this?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think it's funny.
All right.
So, in this book, it is mentioned that, and we could use this as a Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem reference for this episode if you want.
Okay.
I think it was around the time that this all happened. I think that's why it was mentioned in the book. But the first time the Green Bay Packers ever played an away game out of Green Bay was in Ishpeming, and they played the Ishpeming Negaunee All-Stars.
Okay.
So now,
so that would probably put us in the 1920s. Then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and this was prior, this isn't NFL football at this point in time. They were a city team, and they just played other teams around their area.
Right.
So
yeah,
I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, not going to go off on that tangent, at least not right now. But yeah, the early history of the Green Bay Packers is interesting in that way because they really were. They were just like a company team that played other company teams around the state. So.
Well, and maybe we put that on our list of episodes to do because I feel like that would be an interesting episode too. Not mayhem or murder at all.
Not really murder or mayhem, but hey, people love Packers.
Yeah, so maybe we'll put that on the docket at a future time to tackle that if Gavin's down for that.
I'm okay with it.
So, give you a little...
I mean, you know who they played?
Who did they play?
They played Kakana.
Did they?
Yeah.
Are you telling me Kakana had a team?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the Green Bay Packers played against the Kakana team.
Wow.
I mean, it's the 1920s Packers. These weren't superstars, but yeah.
Wow. Amazing. So, yes, the other thing I can add about it too was that the Ishpeming Nagani, whatever, lost to the Green Bay Packers 33-0 in that game.
Oh.
But
I love that you remember that.
it was the reason is because it was the lowest amount of points that a team held the Packers to in that year or something like that.
Wow.
So anyways, I went off. I apologize to everybody for taking, but hopefully somebody found that interesting. And we will wrap this up, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode, whichever one it might end up being.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. Join us in 2 weeks for another exciting episode of Murder and Mayhem.